You're listening to Don't Waste Water.
Stupidity pays off on the short term, is in the way of becoming smart and value-driven on the longer term. Stop with the stupidity. We're heading for disaster, but there is an alternative. If we look at a 3-degree world, you will see a GDP loss in 2100 of 10%. If you look at a 2-degree world, you see a GDP loss that's around 1%. So there's a business case of becoming smart. It's super easy.
Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the Don't Waste Water podcast.
The water sector will not save water. We can bring our ideas, our technologies, our innovations. The rest of the world has to understand the true value of water.
I'm your host, Antoine Walter, and in today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Henk Ovink as my guest.
But that has nothing to do with water, because we're failing on all the other SDGs too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so if we were only failing on SDG 6, you could literally wonder what is wrong with water. But we're failing on all the SDGs, and we're failing on climate.
Henk was, until last month, the executive director of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water.
Do you want to die young rich, or you want to be older and less rich?
Before that, Henk pioneered water resilience from Hurricane Sandy's rebuild by design to becoming the world's first water ambassador, co-leading the 2023 UN Water Conference, reframing water as humanity's most undervalued asset.
The conference never had a mandate for negotiation.
The conference was marketed as nothing happened since Mar del Plata. We're 50 years later. Finally, everybody's in the same room. You can't negate people having hope.
No, I know. But in the context of an outcome that was negotiated, that was never the mandate.
And before we start, let me thank my sponsors, Simple Lab and Science Water.
And for myself, I'm looking for a job. So tips, always welcome.
The Global Commission on the Economics of Water just dropped their final report, and if you haven't heard about it yet, you will, because Henk Ovink, the Commission's executive director and often loudest voice, is about to join me, and trust me, he doesn't pull any punches. But before that, I want to unpack the Commission's report because it brings crucial context for that conversation. The report opens straightforward. For the first time in human history, the hydrological cycle is out of balance. The exposure is massive. About 3 billion people and over 50% of global food production are in areas where total water storage will decline. Over 1,000 children under 5 still die every day from unsafe water and lack of sanitation, and women and girls spend 200 million hours daily collecting water. I know you may recall these numbers, but tragically, they are still as true in 2025 as ever. But then, being an economist-led commission, they calculate the macro hit. High-income economies risk about 8% average GDP loss by 2050, while for lower income, it's even more substantial with 10 to 15%. Overall, water is a global system risk. We are linked by over 263 transboundary watersheds and 300 aquifers, plus long-range atmospheric moisture flows. An interesting highlight and focus of the report is that green water, so soil moisture and vegetation, drives about 50% of land rainfall, and it's been historically undervalued. But maybe even more transformational, because it will sound provocative, the Commission sets a reference need for dignity at 4,000 liters of water per person and day. Let me repeat that so that you're sure I didn't stumble. 4,000 liters of water per person and per day. Why is it not the 50 or 150 liters for drinking and washing we usually work with? Well, we're talking full water footprint here. Everything embedded in our food, clothes, and products. Studies show that the average global citizen already consumes about 4,000 liters a day once you count all that embedded water, so the issue is not the number, it's who gets it, where it comes from, and how fairly it's managed. And the warning associated with that number is strong. We will fail on climate change if we fail on water. Now, don't worry, the report also proposes 5 missions as solutions. Mission 1 is about revolutionizing food systems. The goal is to maximize yield per drop and cut dependence on nitrogen fertilizers while actually improving farmer incomes. The Commission wants to scale micro-irrigation, climate-resilient crops, and regenerative agriculture to cover over half of croplands by 2050, with the aim to save over 25% of irrigation irrigation water by the same date. They're also pushing for about 30% of protein intake to come from plant sources by 2050, especially in high-income diets. And for Africa specifically, they call for unlocking shallow groundwater with solar pumps, but paired with controls to avoid over-abstracting. Mission 2 focuses on conserving and restoring natural habitats to protect green water. They're pushing what I called the 30-30-30 targets: protect 30% of forest and inland water while restoring 30% of degraded ecosystems by 2030. Easy to remember. They also highlight partnering with indigenous people who are stewards of about 40% of remaining natural land. Then Mission 3 establishes a circular water economy. The report notably gives two examples here. Only about 8% of today's total freshwater withdrawals are reclaimed from wastewater, and urban systems lose about 40% through leakage. The idea is to expand industrial water reuse and resource recovery, then reinvest those saved operating costs into resilience. Two more. Mission 4 tackles what we all knew was coming, making the clean energy and AI era far less water intensive. Of course, it's 2025, so we're talking about AI. The report suggests water efficiency standards for chips, data centers, and critical minerals extraction, plus scaling waterless solar cleaning and next-generation cooling systems. And as much as AI was expected, Mission 5, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud in 2025, ensure no child dies from unsafe water by 2030. The Commission calls for guaranteed, reliable potable water and sanitation through public-private philanthropic coalitions, those PPPs with an extra P, that I discussed with Sean Davis. If you want more on that model, the link is obviously in the description. Now, the Commission certainly doesn't stop there, as it packages those missions into 9 recommendations, including governing the hydrological cycle as a global common good, establishing that 4,000-liter water dignity floor, and redirecting at least $700 billion annually in harmful subsidies towards water-positive investments. But I don't want to deprive you from the pep talk with Henk, so for more details, make sure to read the full report. The link is, as you'd expect, in the show notes. But to summarize, and if you had only 2 takeaways from all of this, first, that 4,000 liters per person per day completely reframes how we should think about water allocation and justice. And second, we will fail on climate change. If we fail on water, yes, absolutely. And we already heard that with if climate change was a shark, water would be its teeth. But the positive framing is just as important. Get water right and you tackle climate, food, energy, and economic risks all at once. Want to get the inspirational version of it now? Well, then it's time for me to leave the floor to Henk. Remember, if you like what you hear, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, your boss, or your team. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll meet you on the other side.
I want to open with a stupid question.
The questions are never stupid.
Yeah, that one you'll see is stupid.
Yeah.
Why are you not the special envoy for water?
You should actually not ask me, because I'm not the one who's responsible appointing. There are reasons for that. We wanted a woman from the Global South to lead this effort, and we got Retno Marsudi. As Indonesia was also leading the World Water Forum, it's also very good to have Indonesia lead this. At the same time, of course, if you look in my heart, this is a passion I will always have. And it doesn't really matter. I work luckily closely with Retno and with the UE and Senegal towards the next UN conference. And I will continue to be a water ambassador, officially or not. For me, it's almost everything.
In that panel I was referring to at the Global World Summit, your intervention sounded like a call to arms. You were calling out the water sector, who was sitting in that room between water sector people, and saying, go out and bring that message across, because that's how we will be solving it. Do I encompass your thoughts right with that one?
The water sector will not save water. We can bring our ideas, our technologies, our innovations, our way of evaluating and validating what needs to happen, our understanding of how water links to everything in life, and therefore also to everyone and every institute and collaboration, community, region, sector, partnership. But making sure that water is safe for all of us to drive our societies, our economies, to mitigate and adapt to climate, to save our environment and ensure economies that are just, societies that are just, the rest of the world has to understand the true value of water. The value for energy, for food, for health, for cities, for communities, for humanitarian aid, for climate action, for mitigation to adaptation. If we are not able to make those connections and be nimble in that sense, because the water sector is super small. We're in our own bubble and we're techie and we love our ideas. But that understanding of how water works needs to be brought out to the rest. Second, we also have to increase our scope. With the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, we show that water is way more than the water that we see. It is in our land, it's in our soil, it's in our trees, and in our plants. Water transpiration next to evaporation, water transpiration that comes from nature at large, is good for more than half of the rain on land. And it's that part of the hydrological cycle that from a water perspective, we too often forget. We focus on too much, too little, and polluted in the blue water cycle part and think that with managing water better, we can save water for all. But we have to manage land better. We have to focus on biodiversity, restoration, conservation, and healthy soils. We have to look on how our economies work out in this dimension between nature, water, and climate. And if we do that better out of our single water bubble and make those connections, and convince the world that water is truly this catalyst, this solution space, and the opportunity to achieve our goals on health, on equity, on the environment, and our economy, then we're all better off.
So that means it's an economic question.
Yes, for sure. And then not financial. The economy is about values. It's not only about profits. Part of the finance could be about profitability and, return on investment. But true economics is about values that are financial, but also cultural, environmental, and societal. And capturing those values really means that if we look at the economy through a water lens, we will be able to identify those values and use them as a way to drive economic sustainability, resiliency that is just.
But if you look at the various reports and Clever Brains, you looked at the question from the World Bank to water.org there are lots of studies that were done about what is the return on investment for $1 you put in water. In the US, it's somewhere between 4 and 7, and it goes all the way to sub-Saharan Africa, where it's 1 to 41 or 1 to 70 when you look at wastewater included in that. So it sounds like, economically speaking, it should be a no-brainer, because who doesn't want to take a 1 to 4 or a 1 to 7 or a 1 to 70 return on investment? And still, we will be failing SDG 6. We have been failing MDG 7 before that. We have been failing the water, and you can go back up to Mar del Plata 1977. We're failing, even though it sounds like we have all the incentives to do right.
Yeah.
So what are we not
But that
getting?
has nothing to do with water, because we're failing on all the other SDGs too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So if we were only failing on SDG 6, you could literally wonder what is wrong with water. Why? But we're failing on all the SDGs, and we're failing on climate. We're here in New York during UNGA and Climate Week, and that is that we want, as a society, not myself, but we want as a society in the world, our profits now, our return on investments now. We want to capture short-term stupidity instead of longer-term value creation. Those 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to whatever are about value creation across society. If you invest in water, it trickles down across every SDG. Capturing that return and really making it interesting and relevant for the investors that are behind those investments is very hard. If I invest in water, my health costs go down and job opportunities go up. But the money that comes from investing in water never relates to health or jobs. So it's relevant. It works for a society, economy at large, but it's not always so easy to capture it on a short-term basis. Second, that's the first thing I said, that's the most important. Our validation and valuation mechanisms are wrong. They incentivize short-term investments that make us more vulnerable and create increased climate change. And that mix between that stupidity pays off on the short term is in the way of becoming smart and value-driven on the longer term. Mission-oriented approaches, as we said, that are not only holistic and look at the long term, but are also radically inclusive and are really about bringing everybody to the table, are complex, and we shy away from that complexity. But between now and 10 years, that stupidity will hit us in the face. We already notice it now, The disasters are becoming more extreme. The impacts of biodiversity degradation, water scarcity, and climate change impact are hitting our economies across the world. And money talks, the short-term profit, but also now the short-term losses. I'm not saying that we need more disasters. No, we need less. We don't need wars. We don't need disasters to become smart. But our markets, the way we validate and value our short-term profits, is still in the majority and preventing for us to become better at this.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to quickly thank my sponsor, Simple Lab. If you're in the water industry, Simple Lab has you covered. Simple Lab is your one-stop shop for certified laboratory testing kits, from routine lead sampling to walk-ins and specialized analyses like microplastics, PFAS, and RADs. Order the testing you want online, choose from hundreds of accredited commercial labs, get free round-trip shipping both ways, and by the way, if you have your own lab and just want help with kitting and logistics, Simple Lab can do that for you too. No more coordinating labs, chasing shipments, or wrangling EDDs, just streamlined ordering, clear results, and real support when you need it. It's lab testing simplified. Head to gosimplelab.com, it's the first link in the description. Choose your test and they'll take care of the rest. Thanks again, Simple Lab, and back to me.
That means that, unfortunately, the fact that we haven't moved before means that now the short term is going to be aligning the incentives, because we will see the hits really on
and
the
the
daily
droughts
basis.
and the pollution.
Okay.
And so we will suffer way more. And the problem with that suffering, it will hit, like it hits now, the most vulnerable societies, communities, and environment first. And that crippling effect is something you will never overcome. So we will lose people, economy, and environment at a rate. So it's only going to get worse in that sense, before perhaps it's getting better. But the economists tell me that if we look at a 3-degree world, you will see a GDP loss in 2100 of 10%. If you look at a 2-degree world, you see a GDP loss that's around 1%. So there's a business case of becoming smart. It's super easy. But the curve is that the short-term investment still pays off now. But within 10 to 15 years, that's over. Then we're too late to change the system. And so we will suffer even more. So the impacts of our current and past, current, and ongoing investments in the way we do it now will undermine that economy that is founded in sustainability, resiliency, and equity. The good thing of water is, and I think this is where we have to become way better, it's a solution space. It presents for energy transition, for food security, for health, for our cities, our environment, an amazing opportunity that goes beyond the business case. This is not only where you make money, this is where we can innovate, where we can forge collaborations and coalitions across the lock-ins that we have in society. This is where the opportunities arise. This is where people across generations and cultures can come together. So this goes way beyond, I want to make money. No, this is about how we can make the future now. And I think this is exactly what water helps tell us, inspire us, and saying we can make that future now by looking with a water lens at our society.
But if I'm playing the devil's advocate here, I had that conversation with Gary White about how the mission-driven message comes across and the making the most of the money message also comes across. But what's difficult to bring across is the message of you can combine both. You're going to make a bit less return as if you were investing in oil, but you're going to make returns. And in doing so, you will also be doing good on a water perspective. And that sounds like the most sustainable approach, right? We say we want to be profitable in doing the right thing.
Yeah, but you also have to be very honest. You want to die young rich, or you want to be older and less rich for you and your society. This is not a global south problem.
That's a good framing.
This is for everybody. So it's a choice. Yes, if we continue to be stupid, we will suffer. And the problem with that suffering, it will hit the most vulnerable environments, communities, people first, but not only. We see that suffering in our markets. We see it in the global north, in our cities, in our economies and societies, and that will continue to increase. The problem with that increase, it's not easy to stop. It's not that you can go to the switchboard of the planet and say, oh, stop, we were wrong, let's turn left or right or whatever direction, but different than where we are now. No. The rippling effect of what we're doing, what we did yesterday, what we're doing today and tomorrow is going to be massive. So the moment we realize that But the trajectory we're on is not the trajectory that we want, not from a global north perspective, not from a financial perspective. We're already way in the red. So making sure that that doesn't happen needs the science, the understanding, the storytelling, the inspiration, the innovation, the collaborations across sectors, across geographies, across generations to say, stop with the stupidity. We're heading for disaster, but there is an alternative. Part of that alternative, and a large part of the alternative, can be written by looking at our economies and societies through what? And I think it's our responsibility to bring that inspiration to the world, to other sectors, to societies, to say there are opportunities. It does demand change, and it does mean that things in our economy and from a financial perspective will change, but it will also mean that we will head towards a safer, more resilient, more sustainable, and far more just a planet.
But when we say to the world, who exactly is that? Is it
everybody?
Yeah, but everybody is probably the right answer, but it's
hard.
It's not specific enough to be efficient.
No, of course, everybody is ridiculous because there are communities around the world that are not close to the switchboard. Decision makers, public and private, small and large, are in the driving seat. And I think coalitions of sectors and those decision makers are going to be of critical importance to say, now is the time. But we're bad at keeping our red line agreements. It doesn't matter if we talk about SDGs, a Paris Agreement, or wars. We know that we're heading towards disaster and suffering, but it's like you look the headlights and they're blinding you for really making a decision to shift course. At the same time, luckily, there are many examples from around the world where people, communities and partnerships, public and private, large and small, across geographies, are figuring out what that alternative is. And it's not enough. It's not changing the massive economic ship of changing course. It's not doing that yet. But as the IPCC Climate Change and Land Report tells us that over 99% of our global investments increase climate change, and make us more vulnerable. It also means that in that 1%, we decrease climate change, we mitigate and adapt, and we create opportunity to ensure that we become less vulnerable, more sustainable, more resilient, and more equitable. That 1 can be 2. And once 1% is 2, it can also be 4. And this is the equation we're looking for. How can we ensure that that alternative is scalable, is also changing the way how systemically we value and evaluate and validate our investments and the way how our economies run?
You're today at a conference which will involve more of the private side of the equation. You've been in all these forums which involve a lot of the public side of the equation. Is there a path which has more chances of making an impact than the other? Or said differently, I was in Europe at the time of the UN Water Conference. I stayed up all night every single day because I was hoping, I had so much hopes for this conference. And it's the biggest disappointment in my life. Okay. I came out of that where the only outcome was we have this water action agenda, but I was able to put a commitment in the agenda just using ChatGPT. And the only thing everybody convened was there's going to be a special envoy. And on top of that, it was not you. So I was really disappointed. To which I grew up a conviction that the governments can't solve it. It's not the right level. It's too macro, it's too wide. And it has maybe to go watershed by watershed. It has maybe to go community by community. And so it's more of a, I think you said nimble. I think that's the right definition, nimble approach of bringing people of goodwill together and making it happen at small to mid scale. Does that mean we should give up on the macro scale and focus on that one? Or we can really fight all the battles?
We have to fight all the battles. Just managing expectations, rewinding back in time. If we had the conversation before the conference never had a mandate for negotiation.
The conference was marketed as nothing happened since Mar del Plata. We're 50 years later. Finally, everybody's in the same room. You can't negate people having hope.
No, I know. But in the context of an outcome that was negotiated, that was never the mandate. So if you don't mandate a conference to that. But what it did bring all those local, scalable solutions together. A lot of people took from the conference the opportunity to learn and take those lessons home and improve whatever they were doing within their communities, within the private sector engagement, within finance. This was a conference was attended by more non-government people than government people.
The side events were the real events.
Yeah, the real event. The UN building, we broke all records. Never so many people in a conference, never such a diverse audience. I'm not saying that that is success in itself, but the fact it was a stepping stone, not the end. And looking at 46 years, in that sense, it was the beginning. You're right, there was no negotiated outcome. All of a sudden, the conference didn't change the world. I did not become the envoy. Yeah, it's a funny side note of you. The hopeful part of that the negotiations after the conference really led to an agreement that we can not let this go and that the next step should be bolder, bigger, and better. And that beyond that should set an agenda. It is always on different levels and scales. So we have 2026 and we have 2028. At the same time, the UN also agreed that thanks to the member states, so the General Assembly, that the UN system should improve itself. Because there is no entity on water. There's nobody responsible for water in the UN system. But water is everywhere. It's in UNDP and UNICEF, etc. Don't need to name all of them. The General Assembly demanded Secretary General Guterres to get his act together from a systems perspective and make sure that water is a organizing principle across all the agendas of these agencies. And what you see happening because of that, not only that the agencies come together better on the issue of water. It's also now incorporated in the negotiations of the Rio Conventions on climate, biodiversity, and desertification, which was not the case before. And water there starts to unlock opportunities on how to mitigate and adapt to climate, how to strengthen biodiversity and reverse biodiversity decline, and how to work in the context of where land is degraded and wetlands are disappearing. So while perhaps for every community and or an individual around the world, not an immediate success. The fact that that conference set a very high bar and ambition, abstract but high, and drives now an agenda across these UN agendas and has a follow-up that is way more on impact and opportunities and ensuring that those opportunities also become a reality. I think that's good. Is it enough? No, it's not enough. Second, the conference also showed that it is indeed about local to global and global to local. All those local examples, those rooms where mayors met and talked about their challenges and the opportunities across geographies and cultures, where communities, indigenous and non-indigenous, met and shared lessons on valuing water, where private sector met with finance, with government, and really started to understand how to bring funding, principles, ideas, and opportunities together. This is where the real power was. The day after the conference, so when everybody stopped going to the conference, I was a full day at Pratt Institute here in New York. They had 3 days of water with a global communities of cities, students, and the communities that were involved. And the Saturday was really about the opportunities that they brought. So they used the conference, one, to have at the UN for the first time a high-level convening with decision makers, mayors and private sector, and innovators like designers and students, bringing them in the context of this multilateral process, and then bringing them all out to the university on Saturday to really develop, design, and expose those developments and design to the decision makers to say, hey, these are the alternatives, just in 3 days. Mm-hmm. So those opportunities were also all there. Water is not climate. It doesn't have this year-long negotiation on an agreement. It's not biodiversity, where every other year we come together, like with biodiversity and desertification. There's a good and a bad side to that. So we don't lose all our time to negotiations that fail, but we focus on what are the opportunities that work and can we bring what works to the policymakers to change their policies and regulations, to the decision makers to bring coalitions together across the diverse lock-in of interest, and to the communities, the investors and the entrepreneurs to really implement, scale and replicate the things that work and set the new standards in reality.
And so that's what will happen in 2026 and 2028. So there I can raise my hopes again because the mandate is different.
It's managing expectations. It's 2025. We're 10 years past Paris. We're 10 years past SDGs. We're 10 years past Sendai. And we're 10 years past Addis. And 9 years after Quito with the urban agenda. So a decade of where we saw the world struggle with an agenda that when you read it, is amazing, inspirational, and ambitious. But when it came to the implementation, turned out to be way too hard for the world at large.
Too ambitious, or?
No, I don't think too ambitious, but it was too ambitious to implement because we don't see the results. All the SDGs are off track. The Paris Agreement is not being delivered upon. So the reality is that it's super hard for a world that is on a trajectory of failure to move it towards a trajectory of success. I think we take these things too easy. Say, oh, we organize a conference and all of a sudden things will become better. We've been, thanks to our economic models and the way how we think, abusing our planet and our societies for the benefit for a too small part of that world. The redundancy in that system with 1 billion and 2 billion and even 3 billion people was so large, that redundancy, that the failures that we caused never did hurt us. Now, with 8 billion people and a growing population and economy, the redundancy is over. The stupidity of what we did is what we feel now all over the world. Is that the wake-up call? I don't know. Should that be the wake-up call? No, of course not. We are way smart. And that is the last thing perhaps to this, is that the challenge I face is that we're all super intelligent. We understand complexity. We see interdependencies between social dimensions, economic dimensions, and environmental one. How come that understanding doesn't trickle down in the decision-making rooms where the talent is there, the opportunity is on the table, and yet the easy things still prevail?
Could it be because we try to solve too many things at once? Because there is one, I think, positive example which happened in the past 10 years, which is the Kyoto Conference. We solved the ozone layer issue because it was like, really, we take the CFCs and we take those out. And if we take them out, we're going to solve the ozone layer. And we solved the ozone layer. But that was like, we make a conference about that, we take a decision about that, and then we implement upon that. And humanity did it.
Yeah, but the reason for that was also that the alternative was way easier than the failure.
Okay.
So if you compare it to energy, the alternative for fossil is there, but it's harder to achieve. The vested interest in the existing energy infrastructure, energy economy, is way more complex than when we talk about the Kyoto Protocol and the ozone layer.
But if you take just water and you take just access to water, the world is spending more today in the informal economy of water than it needs to spend to get access to water the conventional way. So it sounds that if you just carved it out and said, okay, the energy guys might solve their energy stuff, the social guys might solve their, and it's horrible to say it that way, but we, the water guys, can be like independent once more and be special animals once more, living in our special part of the world, and we can solve it.
No, you can't, because if our environment goes down the drain, then water goes down the drain too. So these interdependencies are complex, but also are opportunity. Humans are pretty capable of embracing that complexity, but there is a fear in the context of what we leave behind and where we're heading. So we miss the missions that we can embark. With the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, we analyze the challenges, and that's of course a bleak picture. But we also presented a landscape of 5 missions, opportunities, where we can really shift course. Embarking on those opportunities demands courage, a bit of guts, and also just doing it. Because we show every day around the world that those alternatives are there and that they can work. They lack scale, they lack the environment to really flourish, and they also lack the capacity, thanks to an environment where we don't value this, to really change our policies, our regulations, and our financial frameworks.
What is your next big milestone?
Next year, December, of course, is the 2026 UN conference. In the lead up to that, in January in 2026, in Dakar in Senegal, there will be the big preparatory meeting. So those are important stepping stones towards that. With the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, we delivered our report. We focus on the close to 50 initiatives that came out of our work. And for myself, I'm looking for a job. So tips, always welcome.
Are you really looking for a job?
Yeah, because the commission we delivered. And
because it was a mandate, and
the mandate and the money ran out on August 31. In that sense, the 40 to 50 initiatives that came out of that report more or less stand on their own legs. I help and support the implementation. The International Water Management Institute is the secretariat. They do this in kind with their own contributions and the contributions of their staff and their talent and their footprint around the world. There's some science coming out of that. There are projects, there are led by a diversity of actors from around the world. And some of that will resonate again in this global agenda towards 2026. But that's it. While I do many things, which always is amazing, I'm way too young to only hold a portfolio of things. I want to embark on something big again.
May Stevens is part of the program of the conference, and I had the conversation with her at that microphone last year here, how she's the only lobbyist in Washington for water topics when there are thousands of lobbyists for other topics. And I'm thinking you have the perfect profile. Not speaking of Washington, I would not limit you there, but really you have the perfect profile to be that global lobbyist.
I'll continue to be an advocate for water.
An advocate is one thing. A lobbyist is even one step stronger. It's like...
But a lobbyist who represents a sector and clients, and my client is water.
But water being diffused, you would have to have like a body which funds that.
Yeah, that's a problem. We'll figure this out.
We should figure that out.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
I'm dead serious about it.
It takes a village, this African saying. I'm happy to build that village. To bring the young, the youth, the indigenous, the women, the entrepreneurs, the mayors together. This is not about appointing an envoy or organizing a conference. This is really about making sure that we create a type of safe space where the diversity of voices that we need in that find a home, and creating that square, that village square, to ensure that everybody feels safe enough to challenge their own interests in the context of building a coalition that is strong enough to deal with the lock-in that we feel in our environment and society is going to be key. Believe me, water is this opportunity. It's connected to everything, and because of that, it is connected to everyone. The moment you start to understand it, and it doesn't matter where you live around the world, and or small or big you are or your organization is, the moment you start to understand it, it will trigger the change that we need.
I look forward to you building that village. If I can be of any help at any stage, I would be honored to contribute.
Thank you so much for that offer.
Stopping by.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Don't Waste Water. This podcast was brought to you by GF Piping Systems. Loved this episode? Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. See you next time.